Next, I read The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan, and I'm glad that I'm including this book in a video because this now means that I can give it away. This won the Booker Prize in 2014 and I have no idea why. It was probably the best of a bad bunch. If any of you watched any of Barry Pearce's videos, then you know that he said that the Booker Prize of 2014 was something of a joke, and I definitely agree, because this book is terrible. Yes, it's talking about the subject of prisoners of war in Japanese army camps from the perspective of an Australian gentleman, but the entire story felt unpolished. I didn't feel anything for the protagonist or any of the characters who were going through these very dark emotional things. And yes, it was somewhat different to see the atrocity of war from the perspective of these people who were leading the army camps and these camps where these prisoners of war were dying so quickly. But Dorigo Evans for me was just this character who was very bland and vacuous and didn't really have a character. And I understood he was there was this talk of the affair that he'd had with his uncle's wife, and the fact that he believed she was dead after the war and ended up married to a woman that he didn't really love and kept having affairs. But I don't really understand what this book had to do with anything at all. It was filled with pretentious, hyperbolic statements talking about why Dorigo Evans was the most amazing character in the world because he was so sexy and handsome, and he also knew about the arts and about books, and then he was thrust into this world of war, but he took it on the chin and he stuck to helping all of these men. And I just thought it was a load of shit, really, and I hated this book. I thought it took me an age to get through because I hated the idea of having to pick it up. If I wasn't doing that thing like I said about just reading a set amount of pages and then putting this book down, I would have just given it up and given it to the charity shop. But I decided to make it through to the end to see if there were any redeeming features. I thought that I owed it to the characters and I owed it to the people who'd been through this themselves to actually read this book. But I think that it is a subject that has been talked about so much in such better fashion by great films and great documentaries and great media that this book does nothing but give some sort of backdrop for this author to tell the story of a forbidden love, and I really despise it and don't understand why it won such an esteemed prize. Next we have The Portable Bedlam by Elizabeth Mackenzie. And this is a strange book. It follows the character of Veblen, who was named after an acclaimed scientist, and it's something of a romantic comedy in that her boyfriend has asked her to marry him and she has agreed, but she doesn't know whether it is the right thing to do, and both of them are bringing their families into it. And it's really a discussion of modern families and how we don't know about a person in a relationship until we have met their families. Veblen herself has something of a hypochondriac for a mother who has a very long-suffering husband, and because of this Veblen has something of an anxiety about ever confronting her mother about any of her issues. But she also has a father who is in a hospital because he has some sort of mental health issue. Her fiancé Paul has his own family struggles, alongside the fact that he has now perfected something for drilling through men's skulls quickly in the war, and got this job with a major pharmaceuticals company. He still has the struggles of trying to meet his parents' expectations because he has a brother who himself has some sort of mental health struggle. And then there was all this talk of squirrels, and to me it was a lot like reading Furiously Happy but in a fictionalised way. And if you're after a romantic comedy, this is definitely a great book to read. It's a very quick, fast read, and I really did enjoy this book. There were times when I questioned whether it was getting too crazy, whether it was too much like a Zooey Deschanel film or something of that ilk, but I did actually end up enjoying the book for the most part in its discussion of outrageous families, and I like that it made the family somewhat outrageous because it really gave us, the reader, something to focus on and to consider in relation to their own family unit. I did feel some of Veblen's struggles, and you could see how her and her fiancé were really perhaps going to get married for a lot of the wrong reasons, and it did talk about modern relationships in the 21st century. And so yeah, I think that it's a great humorous book that a lot of people should go out and read. If they're after a fast summer read to read on the beach, then it's definitely for you. And yeah, if you like squirrels, then get on it. And finally, I read Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. This book has been doing the rounds on YouTube and BookTube for a while. It was on a lot of lists of the best books to look out for this year, which probably is why I'm quite disappointed by the book. From the get-go, you were told that you were getting a dark book about a woman who, however many years before, there was an accident that saw the death and the loss of these two children. The mother has been imprisoned and the father is going through some sort of early onset dementia, and you understand that you're going to get something of a dark book as his current wife tries to piece together what happened at that time to finally put this ghost that she feels has hovered over her marriage to rest. This book I felt worked really well. I really enjoyed how it started, with us going back and forth from different characters at different times in their life and really getting just fed very slowly these ideas of what had happened to these two children. You know that one is missing, you know that one is dead. You get to see the mother in prison, you get to see her cellmate, you get to see a lot of what's going on in these characters' lives and how it's affected their community. However, you get no answers. You don't get any answers to your questions. It did feel very much like Emily Ruskovich had no idea how to end the story, and again, I don't know whether it was because she's a teacher of creative writing, but I'm finding that a lot of people who have been taught creative writing don't seem to be able to do it well. And maybe I'm one of them. Maybe my book is completely terrible, but not enough people have told me it was yet. But I just ended up really feeling disenchanted with the book, and I felt by not giving us any questions that Ruskovich was actually holding something back that we've been investing our time in, and that she really didn't fulfill her end of the reader-writer contract. And because of that, even though she writes superbly, she's able to craft tension. The idea of talking about early onset dementia was brilliantly done, and I'm glad that it was included in a book. Once again, I felt like she was trying to do too much that ultimately she forgot what the story was about, and I wished that we'd had a completely different ending that gave me answers to some of the questions that I'd had, and we didn't get to spend enough time with a certain character to actually feel anything. And I feel like things that happen to characters, like the final thing that happened to certain characters, was glossed over quite quickly, and I wish there'd been more thought and more time spent on certain aspects of the story than we actually got. That said, I can understand why it is on a lot of the best books of this year's list already. I can understand why a lot of people are enjoying it. It just missed the mark for me. So, them's the books. I am also currently reading The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, and I am looking to finish that before the end of the month, but I probably won't have the time to record a video later on in the week, so I wanted to get the May wrap-up done now. Therefore, I will probably have finished The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. Again, this month seems to have been about debut novels and having a problem with them, and I do have a problem with Barbara Kingsolver's debut novel that really does cement for me the idea that later books are probably the better books because writers have learned how to craft fiction and know what they are doing. You can see the themes that Kingsolver would use in her later works within this novel, but they just aren't done as well as I have seen her do, but it is understandable. Kingsolver is still a very grand writer with her debut novel that was published years ago, I think in the 1970s or 80s, but it's just not her best work. If you've read any of these books and would like to discuss them, please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.